Hello and welcome to this 2015 Digital Writers Festival special Valentine's Day event dedicated to Australian writers who are romantic. This evening we're going to be joined by a very special group of writers who are going to share with us stories of love, some happy, some sad, some hilarious. We'd also love for you watching at home to join in with your messages of love and affection. You can tweet us at Digital Writers using the hashtag DWF15 and we'll read out the best ones as we go along. First up tonight, we're going to be hearing from the lovely Karis McEwen, and I've probably said that wrong and I'm sorry. Karis is a Melbourne-based librarian, writer and curator who has recently published a book based on her blog, the Something Fun project. Take it away, Karis.
Thank you very much, Samantha. You did say my name right, so that's great. Hi, everyone. I'm Karis. I have a blog called the Something Fine Project, and I'm just going to read, a blog and a book. I'm just going to read two really short stories from the book. One is by me. I might as well read that one first. So this is a true story about my first love. It's called Love Letters. The first of many love letters penned by my first love was placed, along with a single yellow rose, in my school locker when I was 16 years old. Since then, others from the same suitor have been stamped and posted across far seas, slipped under the door of my college dorm room, and left on my car windshield to be stained with rain and tears. I'm not sure how many of you had a high school sweetheart, but I can say from experience that it's the greatest thing in the entire world. My first love and I downplayed our feelings for each other in front of our schoolmates, but when it was just us, we stayed up until dawn, kissed in the morning light, and vowed to never be apart. And we haven't been for a very long time. We had our moments, some of them where we've split for months at a time, others that have threatened to break us up for good, but today we're still together, holding on tight. When people ask how we met, I smile and say, we grew up together. I'm not sure yet how our story will end, or if it will at all, but the truth is, you will always forgive your first love for anything. And I love him just the same as I did when he wrote me that first letter, just the same as I always have. So yeah, there's that one. And now I'm going to read another really short story, which is by a writer called Jane Flett. She's an English writer, and you can find her online on my blog as well as on her website, which is just janeflett.com. This is kind of fiction, non-fiction. I don't really know how to describe it. It's called You Want to Hear About First Love. You want to hear about first love? Let me tell you about first love. First love is a scalding bath hissing before your eager, naked body. You should ease into it, but you are so cold and it's been so long, longer than you could ever now imagine. Your toes are numb. You do not ease. You skip, one slender teenage calf after the other. You present yourself like a mother taking a bullet for her children. But there are no mother and there are no children here. It is just you taking the bullet for yourself. In you go, toe, foot, ankle, calf, knee, ass, belly, tits, and yow, it is hot. You discover there are nerve endings everywhere, and just because they've never spoken doesn't mean they don't know how to scream. You're pink and raw, and your fringe clings to the sweat on your forehead. Your eyes sparkle like a seam of fool's gold mining all the way to Mexico. When you and him walk through the club, through the school, through the back streets of your wee town, clouds of steam billow from your skin. There are piranhas nipping around this bathtub, worrying their teeth into your flesh, but still you beam and you splash. Dunk your head, girl. Let yourself submerge. But then, also, sometimes it is not a bath at all. How crazy to suggest it. First love could never be so small and so contained in that lockable room upstairs. First love is a magic carpet, surfing the aurora borealis and winking at Sweden. First love is the tigers beneath the bed with their growling, beckoning orangeness. First love is your heart hitched to a dozen ponies and dragged over the cobblestones while the townspeople bellow with glee. First love lashes you to the pirate's post and sails upon an ocean broiling. First love tastes of Scotch bonnets and nampla and tangfastics and candy floss. First love has sharp teeth. I miss first love. I'm glad it's still out there, burbling in all the hyperbolic hearts. Yeah, and that one's by Jane Flett. So, and that's me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. That was so cool. That was really lovely. Okay, so we're getting some dedications in on the tweets. We've got one from Candice Petrick, who says that her enduring love goes out to the burrito that she is about to eat. Thanks, Candice. Dedications that they want to send in, tweet them into us at Digital Writers or with the hashtag DWS15. Next up tonight we have we have Amy Andrews. Amy is a multi-award winning and USA Today best-selling author who's written 50 romance novels. Her first love is steamy contemporary romance. She loves good books, bad food, great wine, and frequent travel. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Something different and interesting. It seems really fabulous. So I hope everybody sends in some more dedications. I'm going to read out a blog that I wrote last year after a book that I had put out called The Worst Pickup Line You Ever Heard. When I was younger, I had a good friend who was, well, how can I put this, freaking gorgeous. Blonde, busty, great legs, one of those cute little heart-shaped faces, a little chipmunk cheeks. I, on the other hand, was short and curvy and basically pretty damn invisible whenever we were out together. But that was okay. We were friends, and I'd slipped into my wisecracking best friend role quite early in the friendship. It was my job to say, ooh, cute guy, 10 o'clock checking you out, or don't look back, but I think you just made that hot dude we'd pass swallow his tongue. I was also the intermediary. I was one who passed the notes in class between cute and ruffled surfer boy or angsty rock dude or gorgeous geek guy or insert another teenage girl fantasy here guy, and I arranged places and times to meet so they could hook up. I sound a bit like a pimp now I come to think of it. But anyway, this was also meant that I was the one that was stuck with entertaining his best friend. I tolerated that. Some of them were quite nice and equally as embarrassed as me having to watch the two make goo-goo eyes at each other and play tonsil hockey. Except for this one time at band camp. Well, no, it wasn't really band camp. It was a hotel poolside at a beach resort where we were holidaying. We were both 18 and it was a stinking hot day. A day where the more fruity cocktails you drank, the more dehydrated you seemed to become. I was already a very unfetching shade of pink all over from the day before. All I wanted to do was lie inside in the air conditioning until I less resembled somebody who had a nasty allergic reaction. She wanted to go down to the pool and check out the talent. So you can guess what we did, right? So there we were, her looking all fresh and tanned and gorgeous like an invisible fan was like blowing in her face, resplendent in a teeny tiny bikini. And there was me in a baggy t-shirt, my face plastered with zinc cream, looking like I'd contracted a tropical disease. Fortunately, as we were older, I wasn't required to pass notes anymore. Men approached under their own steam. And man, they flocked, always in twos. Thankfully, she decided on who her target was for the day almost immediately. Holidaying jock this time. So I didn't have to suffer through too many alarmed wingmen thinking, Christ, I'm going to have to make conversation with a woman who looks like a flock of seagulls have pooped all over her face. Within minutes, he and his wingmen were wandering over, and before I knew it, holidaying jock was pulling up a chair and flirting like he was Joey from Friends. And I was, once again, stuck with the best friend. And unfortunately for him, he was stuck with me. Normally I was pleasant in these situations, but I was hot and bothered and was not in the mood to be patronised. I didn't want him to pretend interest in me. I didn't want him to feel he had to take one for the team and be with a short, curvy, zinced one so his best bud could score with my friend. I wanted to go back to my room, turn the aircon on freeze, and drown in a vat of icy mojitos. I decided to just preempt all the fake bullshit and let him off the hook. Hi, I said, extending my hand. I'm Amy. Yes, I was just about to tell him he didn't have to bother, but good manners demanded I at least introduce myself before I gave him his marching orders. He smiled at me then and his blue eyes sparkled. Yes, they freaking sparkled. Hi, Amy. He slipped his hand into mine. It was firm and strong, and he didn't seem to be worried that he might contract whatever heinous thing I had going on. I'm not trying to impress you or anything, but I'm Batman. He said it so deadpan that for a moment I just stared at him, and then, man, did I laugh. In fact, at one point, I think I may have actually laugh-snorted. Does that ever work? I asked after I'd pulled myself together. He shot me a faux, wounded look. It's true, he said. I'm Bruce Wayne. Then he pulled out his wallet and showed me his driver's license. Did it work? Damn straight it did. That's it.
Thanks, Amy. That was really wonderful. I loved it. We're having some tweets come through, heaps of tweets come through actually. I'll just read out a selection. So from Lily Edis to her cat, I'm happy I won your love, but please stop with the dead animals. We are strongest when there's no beheadings. And then we've also had an anonymous dedication from your secret admirer to Izzy Butts, M Dog, and Jack Attack. Because that friendship that you gave has taught me to be brave. No matter where I go, I'll never find a better prize. Though you're miles and miles away, I see you every day. I just close my eyes. We'll always be together in respective dreams. Very poetic, anonymous secret admirer person. Well done. Okay, we might go to the next author. So we've got Siv Parker. Siv is an award-winning writer, storyteller, and blogger. Guardian Australia. And a frequent Aboriginal Australian social commentator. Her first book will be published soon. Take it away, Siv.
Okay. Thank you. I'm reading, this is one of the short stories from my blog book. Karis and I and another fellow were the joint winners of the Melbourne Writers Festival Blog to Book Challenge last year. So, amazing coincidence that Karis and I are both in the same session. This is a bit of a deviation from the types of stories that I normally write. And it was interesting that Connor has thought I would be a good match for the romance, a Valentine's Day reading. I'm really happy to be here. Anyway, this is called Honey. And I've had a reading last year where Sam Wallman did some illustrations for me, so I've just tweeted those interpretation of my stories. This is Honey. The police had said to him, I bet, if you took into account a goth would be my close guess at describing what he looked like. I happen to know he took a lot of trouble with his appearance, but that wasn't his most arresting feature. What about the way I walk? I could tell his moods best by his silhouette in a dark street. He only had two speeds, alert or evasive. I gave him lessons in deportment in the dining room, instructed him to push his shoulders back, pull his shoulder blades down to align his spine. I suggested he try stretching his elbows together behind him. I even used my hands, but his upper body refused to uncoil after years spent protecting his underbelly and sitting bent over tenderising another inmate with a tattoo gun. He was a photogenic predator. I could have guessed when I held it up that he didn't know phones could take moving pictures. In a loop 7 seconds long, he still had the glow of a sleek, caged animal. Well, he asked, "What's that?" before he covers his face with both hands. Like most would, I'd spent some time thinking about the fact he'd killed somebody. He lied most of the time, whether he needed to or not, but on this he hadn't bothered. I spent longer wondering whether he regretted it. I'm sure he'd have had lies in waiting, but where I come from, it was indecent to ask. And just in propriety, he didn't know how to kiss. He'd learned etiquette by rote, not touch, and didn't realise that the object wasn't to press my face against the vein in the side of his neck. Cold-blooded is the thought that comes to mind. I'll have to think about what signals I gave off to make him say that we could move out and get a place together and shop together and eat together, and he'd do most of the cooking, and he'd like that forever. I wondered how many years it had taken for him to come up with that plan. But there was no way I couldn't stand his friends. I couldn't stand a few things about him, in fact. His small group consisted of people you'd expect to die alone in a rental room. They were penned into rooms without even hospitality of a complimentary electric kettle, and kept there by their addictions to drugs and failure. They were disposable in his increasingly more elaborate mind games, when he wasn't busy with campaigns of low-level terror against people who hurt his feelings. He kept on the move, but I usually saw him around dinner time. I preferred to eat mostly alone at the tail end of the service, by which time he'd ignore them, so he would torment them with his presence. He had a story of escalating horror for any occasion, condiments included. A pot of honey had appeared on the breakfast trolley. A dousing from a mixture of scalding hot water and honey, and the flesh dried straight off. He graduated from gifts of chocolate and cake to scented soaps and offers of the clothes off his back. And just to show how very close attention he'd been paying, he had a story just for me. A fairy tale based on the premise that I was serving a very long sentence in high security. But I'm nevertheless very clever, so the story went. My education and the way you talk was very valuable. My education was worth a lot of white ox. It gave me an enviable edge that couldn't be stood over for or cleaned out in a cell search. And I would have someone just like him to maximise my potential. All business, I'd have the best cell, location being for status and my pure enjoyment. I would be working in the most prized job in the prison, in the library. Surrounded by books all day, I would have endless stimulation for my superior intellect and would be paid in stockpiles of tokens and tobacco. He said I could even have one of those things, a laptop. It wouldn't be connected to the internet, of course. Well, I write longhand. I guess I could help people with their homework 7 days a week. I might have looked unconvinced this was a deal of a lifetime because he reminded me I could have as much contraband as I wanted. So in jail terms, I'd be a librarian with a law degree, living in the luxury of a residential block, helping people try and get out of jail, typing words only the few can see, dining on imported superfoods and good coffee 3 times a day. It is softly lit, people whisper. My laundry is done for me. No stabbings, and it's the highest paid job in jail. At a certain point in this tale, one might ask, if I was so clever, what did I need him for? That'd be where his violence comes into play, while I'd, of course, continue to sit pretty. The business model was quite sound, but it came with the challenge of transferring contraband between separate blocks was a bonus. But I was in the final stages of tutoring him. He still had months of coursework to complete, but he didn't have months of concentration left in him. Neither did I. By coincidence, his lecturer and I had both decided at about the same time that a jail contraband system wasn't the best concept for him to explore in the pursuit of a diploma of business. The ox shop had served us both well. I used it as a means of explaining the whole wide world. He flourished while he rehashed his empire of incarceration. One of the few times he looked what I took to mean concerned was the thought of the authorities banning the use of tobacco products in jail. This would be a financial crisis for an imprisoned businessman, fatal for some. It wasn't just the deprivation, it was the currency because the whole economy inside revolved around tobacco. Heroin seemed distasteful to him, but I might have imagined that. Could be the same mistake I made as when he told me there are a lot of very sick people in jail. At the time I assumed he meant people other than him. He didn't need to explain that the ox shop's shortfall in product would be filled with more drugs. That seemed obvious. There is only so much skin to cover with tattoos, only so much chocolate a person will consume at premium prices. Different rules applied now he was back outside. When he announced he would kill her to silence while he showered his plate in 3 circuits of salt, the other diners already knew which couple he meant. They all sang in the shower, the cook played guitar, the phone rang with messages about auditions. Drug addicts sat fully clothed, cross-legged in their rooms and stared at the door in the dark. He was resisting becoming one himself, which was a lie. He was just filling time between dosages. When his college routine collapsed under the weight of the real world, he asked for permission to keep busy on the residential garden beds. They were dead, or what wasn't looked like weeds. It was the kind of place where guests wouldn't be surprised, beyond passing comment, that he gardened at night. And more than a couple knew the trick of boiling water in the cell, with an element made from the blades of a disposable shaver. But he'd turned our cells into a pit. Sweetness had no chance of becoming anything new. He was stuck, retarded, twisted and ruined. I talked to him less, I avoided him more. I didn't have time to ask him why I slept on the floor. I didn't bother to hide. I had a complete life beyond his tiny dimensions. And then the inevitable happened. I hurt his feelings. It was undeniably dangerous. He'd learnt all his ways inside. But I'd lived, amongst the ones who stole him, battered him, locked him up and wanted him to die there. I didn't like my chances in a fair fight, but I had him beat on mind games. Thank you. And that's Honey.
Thanks, Siv. That was so wonderful. I think we lost your image there at the end, but we had your voice all the time. I was just listening to it. It was beautiful. So,
Lost my internet connection in all of that.
No, I heard. No, we could hear everything you were saying. We just couldn't see your face. So I don't think it matters because it was the words that were the most important thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay.
I'll just see if we've got some more Twitter messages in. So there's one here from Veronica Sullivan. She says, "I love you at Drake. Thank you for the good time at the bottom and the top." And there's an anonymous dedication from Gemini to Pisces. It's very open-ended. I miss your Eskimo kiss. Ooh, what's that about? Okay, so next up we have Allison Stewart. Allison is an award-winning Australian writer of cross-genre historical romances. If your taste is for dueling cavaliers, wayward ghosts, time travel, and murder mysteries, sometimes all in the same book, Allison's stories are for you. So take it away, Allison.
Thanks, Sam. The story I've got for you today has a bit of a backstory to it. I do a lot of traveling, and one of my favorite places to visit has been Louisiana. And the first time I went to Louisiana, my friend took me down the Mississippi along the old, beautiful old plantation houses there. I had a terrible case of jet lag, and at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was sharing my hotel room with a total stranger, I just could not get to sleep. So I sat on the edge of the bath in this cold, sterile bathroom, writing down this story which came to my mind. So it's a historical story. The setting is the American Civil War, which is a bit of a change from my normal passion, which is the English Civil War. So excuse my American accent, it's not very good. It's called, it's only short, it's called The Promise. Ben had come home at last. Sally had heard the men talk of a terrible battle at a place called Fredericksburg. They called it the last great battle of the war, and talked in anxious tones about the advance of the Northern soldiers into Louisiana. Ben had come home, not as he had left, riding his grey gelding with his hair bright in the sun as he doffed his hat to her, but wrapped in filthy blankets in the back of an old wagon. The slaves gathered in a subdued circle by the front steps of the big house. The men, their hats in hand, and the women, their faces grave, watched as big Joshua carried his master inside, followed by Miss Amelia and the old slave Marie. Sally followed them up the stairs, but the door to the bedchamber remained closed, leaving her alone in the wide corridor. She watched, helpless and ignored, as the doctor came and left, shaking his head, and talking in a hushed voice to Miss Amelia. The front door closed behind the doctor, and Miss Amelia, her skirts in her hand and her brow furrowed, climbed the stairs, one at a time, like an old woman. Sally put her hand on Miss Amelia's arm, but Miss Amelia just shook her head, brushing her hand away. Sally waited beneath the ancient oak tree, planted by a forgotten hand 100 years or more before the big house was built. It dominated the garden. In the shadow of this big tree, Ben had taken Sally in his arms and kissed her for the first time. Beneath this oak, he had asked her to be his bride, and she had said yes, 1,000 times yes, as he placed the emerald ring on her finger. Beneath this oak, Ben had told her he was going to war, and asked her to wait for him. She had said yes, 1,000 times yes. Sally looked up at the lighted window of the bedchamber, and watched the shadowy figures of Miss Amelia and Marie pass and repass behind the open window, until Marie pulled the shutters and drew the curtains. Sally waited until the house was still and the light in the bedchamber had dimmed to a single candle. Miss Amelia had left the door to Ben's bedchamber ajar, and Sally could hear her in her own bedchamber, talking softly to Marie. Ben was alone at last. For a brief moment she thought she had come too late. He was so still, so pale. She leaned over and kissed his forehead, feeling the faintest pulse of life still present. His eyelids fluttered open, and she waited for the slow smile of recognition. Sally. Her fingers caressed his temple. I waited, Ben, just as I promised. Beyond the bedroom door, she heard Miss Amelia's footsteps in the hall. They had so little time. She threw open the high doors that opened out onto the broad veranda. The soft breeze from the river rushed in, lifting the curtains and stirring the air. She looked at Ben and held out her hand to him. Miss Amelia gave a sharp cry. The sheets she carried tumbled to the ground unheeded as she crossed to the bed. Marie, following her, looked not at the bed but at the billowing curtains. She stepped out onto the veranda and looked down into the garden. In the shadow of the oak tree she saw two figures. For a brief moment the lovers looked up and she saw their faces. The old slave crossed herself, shook her head and stepped back into the room, pulling the doors shut behind her. She turned to the woman who sat weeping by the bed and put her hand on her shoulder. It's all right, Miss Amelia. He's with Miss Sally now, where he belongs. Miss Amelia looked up. Sally? Marie nodded. I told you when she died of the fever her soul didn't pass to the other side. She's been here all this time waiting for him, just as she promised. They're together now, Miss Amelia. Miss Amelia rose to her feet, straightening her skirts. She looked down into her son's peaceful face. Gently she picked up his right hand, and as she did so, an emerald ring tumbled from his fingers. So that story's in my little collection of short stories. That's it from me.
That was really lovely. Thank you, Alison. It was quite sad for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, sorry about that. Everything else was too long.
It was lovely. It was beautiful. We've actually
love endures through time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's okay. There's we've got another tweet through. It's actually quite poetic as well. It's from Mathura Mama to Lucy Lou and Rory Koo. So that okay, it gets better. I once won a Valentine message billboard between Flinders and Spencer Street. The relationship lasted 1 week more, so that was a wasted treat. If only I'd waited 20 more years without pining and whining, wasted tears, I'd have realised that love means something loose, wild, my crazy child. That's quite lovely. So lucky last, we have Lee Christine. Lee's debut novel, In Safe Hands, was published in 2012. And
Sorry.
The last of which, A Dangerous Arrangement, will be released in June this year. So go for it, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose this one here needs a little bit of backstory as well. It's a romantic suspense. I've chosen to read from the hero's point of view, and it entails quite a bit of introspection on his behalf. The backstory is that he's a lawyer. It's a story about a male lawyer and a female lawyer who have a short relationship of 6 weeks when they find out that they have a conflict of interest. They're both acting for very high-profile clients, and they have to terminate that relationship. And so they're brought together through mediations and court cases and trying to stay away from one another. So this is sort of a story from the hero's point of view, where he's thinking about that, thinking about what he has to do to fix everything. So it's chapter 20, so we're quite a way into the story. Evan shifted the Porsche down a gear, turned into Sussex Street and headed towards the King Street wharf. 20 minutes earlier, he'd left Layla with Dixon, with plans to meet back at the house in 2 hours. That left him about an hour to track down Allegra Greenwood. Understandably, she wasn't answering her phone the Thursday night of a long weekend, but a quick call to her secretary, Josie, and he learned Allegra and Luke were at the Malaya restaurant at the wharf. He pulled into a no parking zone outside the restaurant, threw the car into gear and killed the engine. On the curb, he did up his top button and straightened his tie. With luck, he wouldn't need a jacket to get in. Layla still had his coat. For the first time since the fire, Evan remembered the jacket and sunglasses he'd left in her office. He smiled to himself. If he kept hanging out with Layla, he'd need to get fitted for some new suits. A blast of cool, filtered air greeted him as he opened the door and stepped inside. An elaborately designed black and white marble counter dwarfed the demure Asian woman standing behind it. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "I don't. My name's Evan Barclay. I'm a lawyer at Poole Greenwood. There's an urgent matter I need to discuss with my employer, Allegra Greenwood. I understand from her PA she's dining here tonight." "I'm sorry, I'm not at liberty. She's not answering her phone," Evan continued on as if he hadn't heard the objection. "She's likely to be with her husband, Luke Nielsen." The woman hesitated, looked him up and down, then appeared to come to a decision. "Just a moment." Evan held his breath as she consulted a leather-bound folder, running her index finger down the list of reservations. "There's no booking for Greenwood. Was Nielsen the other name you mentioned?" "Yes, there's a booking for a Mr. Nielsen." The woman looked up. "May I have your business card?" Evan opened his wallet, pleased he'd left it in the console of his car and not in his jacket. He took out a card and handed it to the maitre d'. "I won't be a moment." The woman departed, and Evan looked around the expensive entrance. Wrought iron wine racks reached to the ceiling and formed an attractive partition from the main dining area. Two enormous fish tanks stocked with lobsters and mud crabs, blissfully unaware of their imminent fate, graced another wall. Why hadn't he brought Layla to places like this, been more open with her, more honest about his background? After all, he had a lot to be proud of. It was only his early life that shamed him. Even now, he could feel the hurtful stares, hear the callous comments of the townspeople. Look at the mother. What hope does the kid have? Evan dragged in a deep breath and cast aside the memories. Like an idiot, he'd convinced himself that keeping his relationship with Layla a secret would give her time to get to know him, the real him, before she had to learn about all the other stuff, like his mother abandoning him before he reached double figures. But he hadn't used the time with Layla as he'd intended, and that was entirely his fault. He'd kept her at a distance, protecting himself, suspecting she was still in love with her late husband, fearing he'd never measure up. One time, when she'd started telling him about her family, he'd changed the subject so quickly she'd never spoken of them again. Evan shoved his hands in his trousers pockets and shifted his weight impatiently. Across the restaurant, he could see the maitre d' speaking to Allegra. He blew out a relieved breath. One weekend. He had one weekend to fix everything, to bring Layla closer and come clean about those early years. Otherwise, she'd read about his background along with the rest of the country when that bastard of a sports journalist released his biography. Not wanting to speculate on what juicy tidbits the journo might have dug up, Evan watched the woman come towards him, Allegra's taller figure behind. He wished those people from that one-horse hole of a town could see him now, see the money he'd made, the apartment, the Porsche, the rewards of years of hard work. Still, none of that felt as good as knowing he'd proved them wrong. He hadn't turned out to be the drain on society they all thought he'd grow up to be. And he didn't thank God for that. He thanked George Payton.
Thanks, Lee. That was a lovely little taster there of your... Is that your next book or your first book?
No, that's actually my third book, which was released on the 8th of December.
And what's it called?
In Safekeeping.
In Safekeeping. Okay, thanks.
Yes, it's a part of a series, so it's the third in that series.
Yeah, and the next one that's coming out is the fourth?
Is the fourth, and it's called A Dangerous Arrangement, and it's the first one in another series, though I still plan on continuing on with the In Safe series as well.
Excellent. Well, everybody's had a nice little taster tonight. I haven't got any more tweets to read out, which is a bit sad, but anyway, I'll just put my background music back on. So I'd just like to thank all of our lovely readers tonight, Karis, Amy, Sue, Allison, and Lee. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
We'd
you.
also like to thank Harlequin, Escape Publishing, and the Something Fine Project. And I'd also like to say that if you enjoyed this event, you should check out some of our other events, including our special Stella Prize event featuring some of the authors of the Stella Long List, which is on Monday at 8 p.m. Just head to digitalwritersfestival.com for all the details. I hope that you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day, whatever you're doing, and thank you very much for joining us. See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Bye.